cat here. I'm reading out of Return to Elysium. It's a book by Joan Grant. She was a seer and where is she then, my little kid? And a writer of her own far memories. This is her life as Lucina. She has returned to Elysium to be mentored by Asclepius. And she'd fallen in love with Cleon, and it was an unrequited love. We are now in part 2. East Wind. A tangle of masts made a restless pattern against the rising moon. Behind me the lights of Athens starred the hills. Which mast belonged to the ship that would take us to Rome? Would I know tonight, or have to conceal my impatience until Epicurus considered he had made a favourable bargain with the shipmaster? I saw him coming along the quay, threading his way between bales of merchandise, oil jars, disconsolate pack donkeys. We shall sail at dawn, he said. There's only one cabin. In any case, one cabin is cheaper, though I could sleep on deck if you prefer it. Of course not. Why should you? He looked offended, which was odd, as he was usually pleased if I showed a sense of the value of money. The ship was larger than I had expected, and the sailors seemed friendly enough. Epicurus insisted on having our 3 chests in the cabin with us, which left only enough room for the straw pallet. The blankets were grey with dirt, and I saw several cockroaches. You had better get some sleep before we sail, he said. It's going to be rough tomorrow, but the wind is in the east, which should be a good omen. He gave me 3 of the blankets and kept one for himself. He seemed to find it easy to ignore the rats which squealed above the creak of cordage, for he fell asleep very quickly. Cargo was still being loaded. People tramped across the deck above my head, and heavy thuds told me when another bale was thrown into the hold, which was separated from us only by a thin partition. It was a relief when I knew we had cast off. I no longer had to wonder what I would do if Cleon joined us and implored or even commanded me to go back to Elysium. Had Epicurus guessed why I had agreed to leave at night without saying goodbye by anyone, or did he think me indifferent? He was still asleep when I went on deck. The steersman stared at me, but did not return my greeting. 2 sailors were trimming the sail, and a third was coiling a rope. The hills were coming up from the mist, and I saw a small boat whose course would soon cross ours. I watched it idly, until I suddenly recognized the pattern of the sail. It belonged to Elysium, the boat Cleon always preferred. Now I should have a chance to use all the phrases I had so carefully rehearsed. I should be able to show him that it is not pleasant to learn that a woman can be as scornful of love as a man. Or should I weaken and allow myself to be persuaded to go back? Or worse, could I avoid showing how easy it would be to behave like a penitent child? The steersman heard the hail and brought the ship into the wind. I saw a rope flung to the boat as it came alongside. The man who leapt to our deck was not Cleon, it was only Narcissus. If he realized I was disappointed, he concealed it admirably. I hope you enjoy a rough sea better than I do, he said amiably. If Poseidon is growing deaf, he should appoint an efficient nereid to perform his duties. I asked for a suitable wind, and he sent us a gale, most careless, though less embarrassing than if we had been becalmed. He turned to shout directions to the sailor who was hauling on board the chests he had brought with him. There were 7 chests, and I recognized one as having belonged to my mother. Even when surprised, Lucina, you must learn to conceal it. The mouth half opened is disastrously unbecoming. I shut it so quickly that I nearly bit my tongue. How did you get here? Never underrate the intelligence of your friends, or of your enemies, he said briskly. When I saw you coming back from the olive grove, I took the trouble to search for a sign of disturbed earth. It was considerate of you to bury the white roses where we discovered Agamemnon's body. I thought it probable that your pride would not allow you to waste your time on sighs for Cleon, who, to anyone who has the wit to see him as he is, cannot be considered at all remarkable. Therefore you would decide to leave Elysium, for Asclepius had already denied you an alternative outlet for your talents. Who would go with you? Epicurus. This would have been obvious to me even if you had not been so considerate as to make your detailed plans in this storeroom. The storeroom window is concealed by shrubs, which provided me an adequate, though uncomfortable, vantage point. I'm not ungrateful, he added magnanimously, for if you had been more skilled in conspiracy, I should have had to follow you to Athens, instead of taking this easier method of interception. But we are going to Rome. We shall probably starve. I don't think we have very much money. It won't be nearly so comfortable as staying in Elysium. I have every confidence in the practical ability of Epicurus to provide us with tolerable comfort. He knows nothing whatever about women, but I can supply this deficiency in our plans. I've spent 4 years training you to use the weapons natural to the female. I shall now collaborate with Epicurus in taking tribute for Lucina from Rome. Do any of the others know where I am? Asclepius knew you had decided to go. I think he expected you to give him the chance to tell you himself that he wishes you every success in your venture, and that you will always be welcome if you decide to return to Elysium. He sent a letter to Epicurus containing a list of names, men of affairs, who may be influential if we need help. So everyone knew I was going. They were glad to get rid of me. They thought I should come crawling back to ask for shelter. How long would it take me to prove to them all that they knew nothing about Lucina? It was difficult to see myself as the woman to whom Rome must pay tribute, for the voyage was increasingly squalid. Narcissus groaned in the cabin, imploring Poseidon to let him die. Epicurus played dice with the sailors and lost more than he would admit. For 3 days I found a temporary escape from a horrible sense of inadequacy by looking after a sailor who had crushed his hand. I set 2 of his fingers and stitched up the torn flesh with a needle and thread which Narcissus had brought with him. We entered the Tiber on a winter afternoon. Narcissus, cheerful though still pallid, stood with me in the prow. I watched a dead donkey float past on the yellow water, legs protruding from the carcass, a hideous parody of a wineskin. Gulls were screaming above a mat of refuse, the tribute of city spew clutched in their claws. I shivered, but not only with the cold which drove down on us from the 7 hills. You don't like the city you have come to conquer, said Narcissus. Even snow would be dirty here. Even a proud ship would rot if it stayed in this river. Epicurus joined us. Lucina has determined to despair, said Narcissus. He put his arm through mine. My dear Lucina, you are seeing Rome at a disadvantage. How fortunate that we should have surprised her when she was unprepared. We need never fear a woman who cannot demand homage. We see Rome with her hair in curling rags, wallowing in a dirty bath, a slut to her fingertips. Even the weather has conspired against her. No suitor retains his ardor if the room in which he waits the presence is too cold for desire to flourish. I laughed, for the wind-driven sleet could no longer threaten us. Narcissus was clever. He had stripped Rome of her power. He had made us see her through an unguarded window. Epicurus joined in the game. Even the hero cannot impress the slave who watches him wait blurred after a banquet, cursing Mars because his armor pinches a belly swollen with wind. Our small ship no longer seemed insignificant among the quinkerness, the trading barges, the pleasure boats of Roman nobles. We had come secretly because our strength did not require the bombast of heralds. Greece was older than Rome and much more subtle. The shipmaster to whom Epicurus had paid an extra stater told us the name of a tavern where we could lodge. Until we found more suitable accommodation. It was in a narrow street. Sorry, it was in a narrow street which led from the quays. Both Epicurus and Narcissus apologized for the squalor, so I could tell them that to me it was exciting. I had never been closer to a wine shop than a glimpse through a lighted doorway, for Epicurus had hurried me past the taverns on our way through Athens, as once Elisa had hurried a child who made another journey by night. Narcissus had all our belongings brought up to the larger of the 2 rooms, which he was sharing with Epicurus. My room opened out of it. There was a pallet bed, a stool and a bucket of water in which floated wisps of dirty straw. A female with one eye closed by a livid bruise brought me a brazier, but seemed too stupid to understand my Latin. I combed my hair and put on a robe of dark red wool. My hands were gritty with dust, which I had tried to sweep from the floor before I took my shoes off, but the water was so unpleasant, too unpleasant for me to wash. My opinion of the ability of Epicurus began to diminish rapidly. Surely he would have made more effort to look after me. Narcissus saw that I was disgruntled. Lucina is missing the cockroaches, the stench of bilge and dying sheep, he said. Her ancestors must have been sailors. We must purchase a pleasure barge for her, so that she can take her ease on this salubrious river. There are sufficient cockroaches here, and a stench which must be unrivaled even in the organ stables. Perhaps one of you would like to play Hercules and clean my room before I try to sleep there. We shall find a better place tomorrow, said Epicurus defensively. I deliberately asked for an obscure tavern. Until we have found a suitable background, it is wiser to avoid places where we might meet people of importance. He is right, Lucina. We must not lose sight of the main plan and the temporary inconvenience of reconnoitering our objective. However, there is no reason why we should eat here if you will deign to walk through the streets until we can provide a carrying litter. By the time we had found a tavern in a wide street that led out of a large, well-paved square, I had regained my temper. The main room was crowded with plebeians, who I judged to be chiefly shopkeepers or mercenaries. There were not many women, so when the innkeeper showed us to a table set apart from the rest, most of the men turned to look at me. The food was good, or perhaps a sea voyage had made us appreciative of anything except millet porridge and salt fish. We had pasta with a thick meat sauce, strongly flavored with garlic, followed by small fish stuffed with herbs and fried in oil. Epicurus left us before the end of the meal, saying that he would meet us later, and that Narcissus could take me home. Home used to mean Elysium. Now it was a dirty room in a foreign city. Have some more wine, Lucina. If you continue to look so miserable, I shall begin to wish I had stayed in Greece. A gloomy woman finds few suitors in any country. I felt contrite. They had brought me here because I wanted to run away, and now I was being disgustingly selfish. I made a determined effort to be cheerful, and found it much easier than I expected. It was amusing to see so many strangers, to invent stories about them, to hear Narcissus laugh because I had thought of a remark to amuse him. A soldier came through the doorway with a woman hanging on his arm. She wore brightly coloured clothes and a necklace of heavy silver links studded with turquoise. I thought she might be a patrician, until I noticed that her nails were ingrained with dirt, her face taut and anxious under the paint. He is a decurion in one of the foreign legions, said Narcissus. You can recognize them by the colour of the plume in the helmet. You will notice that the innkeeper treats him with respect. If he didn't, this place would be wrecked by soldiers sent here by the decurion, of course, though nothing could be proved if a claim for damages was made. Is the woman his wife? No Roman would bring his wife to a place like this. You had better take your fill of these surroundings, for we shan't be able to bring you here or anywhere like it again. I think I'll stop this here. It's the first part of the second part of Return to Elysium, and this is called East Wind.